Hello everybody. So today's video is going to be back to my old roots when the channel used to be called Discus Newbie. Discus has always been my favourite fish, so today's video is going to be about the basics for keeping discus. What you need to know if you're interested in keeping these fish basically. It's a bit of a redo of an old video I used to have on my channel, which was quite popular, but the audio was so bad on it that I thought it was worth redoing and adding in a few extra bits I've learned in the last couple of years since I did that video. So, as a bit of a qualifier, we all know that everyone on the internet's an expert on everything, but it's strange how no one ever agrees on anything. So, the information I'm about to present to you, this is my opinion of how to keep discus in the optimal conditions. Again, it's my opinion, none of these are hard and fast rules, and everybody out there will know or want to present a different way of doing everything, but this is what I would do, and this is what I would advise if asked. So we'll start with the aquarium, the house you're going to keep your fish in, and the bit that catches most people out is how many to keep. They'll see one or two advertised on a local forum or something like that. You realize they do a lot better. They've got that group and they feel a little bit more protected. And obviously, if you get a pair, they can live in twos for the time that they're breeding. They'll start looking at that minimum size of 6. And to house a group of 6, kind of minimum you want to be looking at something like 180 litres, which if you're American is probably like a 40 gallon tank, a 40 breeder, but again that's a minimum. If you want to put in tank mates or you want to fill it up with loads of substrate and decorations, you might want to expand that a little bit. I don't think the shape of the tank is that important. My preference is for a long tank over a tall tank in most scenarios, and I think this works here too. That's mainly because the footprint of the tank aids that gas exchange, which keeps the water in a better conditions. The discus, in my experience, they swim all over the tank. They're not a top dwelling or a bottom dwelling fish. They like go where the hell they want to go, basically. Another big consideration is heat, because discus like the water warm. The sweet spot's kind of 28 to 30 degrees Celsius, which I think is 82 to 86 Fahrenheit. So you need to remember that when you're looking at things that are going to go in the tank, like plants or other tank mates. And while lots of fish will live at 30 degrees, they probably won't thrive at 30 degrees. And lots of the more delicate plants probably will melt at that heat. So there are lots of discus specific plants, look them up, that will do just fine. And don't confuse that melting with things like plants changing over from immersed to submersed growing. Often when you buy a new plant, it's been grown out of water, and you plant it, the first thing it does is melt away. It should come back if it's one of the plants that's suitable for a discus aquarium. And things like Amazon swords, a lot of the crypts, a lot of things like giant Val cinereus, all that kind of stuff, they'll do quite well. So now you've got your glass box ready for your fish. The next big consideration is going to be the water. Never a truer word was said than you don't keep fish, you keep water. And water quality is the key to success. Stability trumps perfect parameters, I think. There's no point chasing values. If you've got water that's consistent, stick with it, rather than trying to lower pH or raise pH or anything along those lines. The reason that water quality can be an issue is because these are big fish. I mean, they eat a lot, so they poo a lot that comes out the other end. So you really need to have an established filter capable of handling a large bioload. That's really a must. And as well as that, you're looking at large water changes. I mean, really large water changes or daily water changes are not unusual. You do not need to do these things, but that's how the breeders get the best out of these fish and the people that raise them. Your water changes, as well as removing detritus from the tank, that's also replacing minerals and things like that the fish use. There used to be an argument about whether hormones were affecting fish growth, and water changes would take care of that. I'm not quite sure I subscribe to that, but if everyone does it, it can't be a bad idea. You might want to then think about whether you want a planted tank or a bare bottom tank or something in between. I've tried all. Bare bottom tanks are brilliant because they're really easy to keep clean because there's nowhere for dirt to hide and accumulate. But they're also bare bottom, there's nothing in them. It's definitely a look and people go for that, there's nothing wrong with that, but I do like a planted tank as well. But again, you get a benefit of plants helping your nitrates, but then again that creates extra little crevices and places for detritus to build up. So there's a balance there. The hybrid to that is obviously, you'll see a lot of people, they put the plants in pots and they still have no substrate and just have a few pots with some nice plants in there to break up the bare bottom. The other consideration to make, as well as whether a planted tank or a bare bottom or whatever helps with the cleanliness, is the other decorations. If you have a black background in your tank, for instance, and get some pigeon blood fish, that can lead to peppering of those fish. Again, there's probably a video in itself about peppering and the genetics of Discus, but it can be an issue, as some of my fish that are pigeon blood have peppered and some haven't, so there's a long ways to go on how that works. So you've got your glass box set up. For the fish themselves, you've got two main choices really, is whether you want domestic fish or wild fish. Wild fish, as the name would imply, come from the wild. People have begun breeding wild fish, which would make them more domestic, but we're effectively talking about the wild strains that come from the Amazon. They're less tolerant of fluctuating water conditions, and they do tend to prefer specific water conditions because they do come from the wild. And the domestic fish, they tend to be your brighter strains that have been bred for a long time. The number one thing I think is to avoid mixing the two. If you want to keep wild fish, keep wild fish. If you want to keep domestics, keep them, but don't mix the two together because it probably will lead to problems. On the domestic fish front, the two main areas they come from are your Asian bred Discus from breeders and farms all over Asia and Malaysia, places like that, as well as the Stinker line, which is a German line of fish that come from the Stinker family. Have a look at one of my other videos from Mark Evenden, who runs Devotedly Discus here in the UK, and he has a lot of experience with Stinker fish and can tell you all about them. So have a look on the internet, see what kind of strains take your fancy. I would avoid pet shops in the main. I mean, some of them are supplied by really good breeders, but you tend to get a better deal by going to a specific importer or breeder who are dedicated in Discus. Ideally, you'd like to see your fish before you buy it, if possible, but often you're getting them shipped in from a while away. But make contact with the breeder, talk to them, email them, join their Facebook group, whatever it may be. So what you want to make sure is that you do what that breeder tells you to help look after them. Take their advice. These breeders can become an invaluable source of information. If you do manage to get to see them in person, avoid any shy fish if they've got clamped fins so the fins aren't standing up and proud. Ask to see them eat and go for the ones that are looking the healthiest, the brightest, the most active. They might not always be able to see them eat if they've just eaten, they might not be interested, but these are the ideal situations. Once you've got them, quarantine is the next important thing. I would always say it's always a good idea to quarantine fish. But if you've already got fish and it's from a different supplier, for instance, then cross-contaminations is your biggest worry there. Yeah, it's essentially there's parasites or viruses going from fish from different sources where it might be okay in one fish, but if it gets across to another fish, it can end up killing it. It used to be called Discus plague. Cross-contamination is what it's usually referred to these days. And the gold standard for quarantine methods is it's called the Sacrificial lamb method. I've explained this before in videos. Basically, you need to take your Discus from stock A in one tank, Discus from stock B in another tank, and then in the third tank you take one from each stockpile and put them together for a number of weeks, make sure everything's okay, and then you mix them. And obviously if anything comes up, you treat them and see how you go from there. Other tank mates that you can keep with your Discus, two schools of thought here. Do you want something that's going to do a job in your tank, or you just want something that looks pretty? So if you're getting fish to do a job, you might buy bristlenose Plecostomus, or Ancestris rather. They will help keep your glass clean. Some people have reported problems with them. I've kept them that way for years and never had a problem with them. You might want Sterbai Corridoras to help turn your sand around and keep it fresh looking. Whatever it may be. The rule of thumb again is don't buy anything that's so small it'll fit in a large Discus's mouth. So that kind of rules out neons and things like that. You'll see in my tank I've got cardinals, and even some of them have gone missing, the smaller ones. And you don't want to buy anything that's going to outcompete the Discus for food, because Discus are a bit of a grazer in my experience. So if you've got something that's always starving, that's out there and it eats everything that goes in the tank, your Discus will go wanting. In terms of food, for years I fed beef heart or pork heart, and I still maintain there's nothing wrong with that. A good quality beef heart's great food. But I've now moved on to more pellets. I feed the Vitalis Discus pellets now. I think they're great food. Flake, frozen foods, blackworms, things like that, they're all great. I mean, I used to always avoid bloodworms because there wasn't really any nutritional value to them, and they could often cause more problems than they were worth. But the gamma radiated ones these days are fine as a little treat. The important thing with Discus is feed them more than you think you need to. A lot of fish you'll feed them maybe once a day and miss a couple of days to let them rest, but Discus will eat every day, especially if they're growing. They'll eat several times a day quite happily. There used to be a rule about feed all that they can eat within 10 minutes or something like that, which is a good rule of thumb, but I've noticed my fish will eat for hours and they'll graze away quite happily on food on the bottom. Now, don't let things rot away, but don't hoover it up too quickly, you'll just be wasting money. So they are my really high level first things to think about if you're thinking about keeping Discus. But my main bit of advice would be take your time, ask questions, but in terms of keeping them, good water, good food and good fish, you won't go wrong. As always, let me know in the comments if you get any questions or thoughts on what I've been saying, and check out all my other videos. There's a lot of Discus stuff on my channel, and if you're new here, please consider subscribing. Catch you next time. Thank you very much.